Hi everyone, my name is Johanna and I'm a health coach, advanced conversational hypnotherapist, and I specialise in perinatal mental health. Maybe a bit of a hard subject today, hard subject to talk about for some people, to talk out loud, but it's a real thing, and I'm talking today about gender disappointment. It means that someone, maybe you are expecting a child and you have discovered the gender of your baby and you had actually hoped that it was the opposite gender. Say you're expecting a boy and all you so desperately wanted was a girl. Some people will think that you are absolutely mad for saying this out loud. I remember a story a couple of years ago of a guy who was very verbal about he was desperate for a boy. He told everybody. And you guessed it, his firstborn was a girl. And he found it genuinely hard to hide his disappointment. And a year on, his wife gave birth to another baby girl. In the meantime, his sister, who's a close friend of mine, went through an ectopic pregnancy. And one of her fallopian tubes was so damaged that it had to come out. And that made it very hard for her to have another baby. So understandably, she was very upset about her brother's wish for a certain gendered baby, and she wasn't even sure if she would ever be able to have a second child, a brother or a sister. It didn't matter to her as long as she could have a baby brother or a baby sister for her firstborn. So things became quite bitter between them for a while. They did work it out eventually. And she had another baby. For who's interested, she had a boy, and her brother, still wanting a baby boy for himself, him and his wife decided to get pregnant a third time. They had twins, 2 girls. Now some say that's karma coming to bite him in the rear end. It's his own fault. And I still see them every now and again, and they're an extremely happy family. He's wonderful with his 4 girls. And everything was sorted out between him and his sister. Everything's fine. They're still very close. So why am I telling you this story? Because something can be said for both parties. Yes, losing a child, a health scare, not knowing if you'll ever be able to have another baby. These are all very real motivators to say, hell no, you do not get to be disappointed about a thing like a gender. You should be extremely effing happy that you have healthy children. And that can be a very sensitive subject, to lose a child or to have concerns about getting pregnant again, the health risks involved. But, can there be room for a preference next to those emotions, a preference for a specific gender? And I think a preference is just that, a preference. You may like cheese, you may hate cheese. You may love summer, hate winter, vice versa. You may prefer bloody horror movies opposed to romantic comedies. These are just preferences, your own personal preferences. And as long as they don't bother you or anyone else in your life to the extent that you can't function normally, is there really a problem to have that preference? Just, have a preference for one thing or the other. And having a preference for a boy or a girl I don't even think that's a huge issue for most, as you'll most likely hear people say, oh, I prefer a boy, but as long as the baby is healthy, it doesn't really matter. But deep down inside, there's that little voice wondering, will they be slightly disappointed when the baby appears to be the opposite gender that they were hoping for? Now, people will give you wonderful tips in these cases, go and buy something nice and cuddly for the baby. You were wanting a boy, now you're having a girl. Go and buy something nice, in the hopes of getting you a bit more enthusiastic about the fact that, you're having a girl. It can be really nice. Or they may tell you stories about someone who's experienced this and is now thick as thieves with their child, regardless of their sex. Or they'll say things like, you already have 3 girls, how convenient for you that you're not having a boy, which you were hoping for, but you're having a 4th girl. Wonderful. And how easy, you don't have to buy new clothes. You don't have to buy any new stuff, new toys. You can just reuse everything that you already have. But none of that really takes away the disappointment. And maybe people will just, stop being so verbal about it and go internal. They don't dare say anything anymore, and they'll start to crop up all these feelings that they can now no longer verbalize because people judge them for having an unpopular opinion. And that could potentially be a recipe for disaster. I've said in many of my videos, the more you think certain thoughts, like brain gym, the more you think them, they grow, the bigger and stronger they grow. It's like training your muscles in your tummy at the gym. Do it long enough, hard enough, and you'll have a six-pack. And the same can happen to these internalized thoughts. The more that you think about them, the more they become your truth, and the less flexible you will become to this truth, because it gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and it becomes the only truth. The more people push you to not talk about it or make you feel bad about having these thoughts, the more internal you may go. Will that make the thought go away? No, it'll grow into something huge. And even worse, if the outcome is that you're now turning your thoughts into this strong six-pack inside your own mind, the likelihood of you not bonding with your baby once he or she is born, that grows too. Or maybe the resentment over not getting what you think you truly wanted, and the reality where people judge you and you feel shame or anger or any other negative emotion. It's now intertwined with the fact that you have this little baby that you are supposed to love and take care of. And that doesn't mean that you won't be able to love and take care of the baby. But what it could potentially do is stir up lots of negative feelings in your life that will come back to haunt you at some point. And these things can grow into things like anxiety or shame or anger, insecurity, and they'll show up at the weirdest moments in your life. They're all emotions that you don't want or need in your life, especially now, that you have someone extra to take care of beside yourself. You have this beautiful wee baby. And the point I'm trying to make here is that gender disappointment, it's a real thing for some people. And because it's not a very generally accepted thing to feel, it may become a problem to yourself or to you and your relationship with your child, or to you and your relationship with people in your social circle. And the common denominator here is you. So if you feel that this preference that you have, that it's causing you to fall out with people or to feel feelings that aren't positive, then, it may be time to start sorting out for yourself, where did these feelings come from? You may be asking yourself the questions repeatedly. Why does it matter to me what gender my baby will have? Why can't I just feel grateful for the fact that I'm pregnant at all, or that I'm having a baby, that I'm becoming a mom or becoming a dad? Why don't people understand my point of view? Why am I not allowed to have this preference? Why do they think that it's any of their business in any case? And these are all very logical questions and logical thoughts. Maybe they're not the most productive ones if you want to understand why this is affecting you so much. This is allowed to be about you after all. And that makes me think of the next question. Why do you have this specific preference? Why do you believe? Or what? Maybe a better question is, what do you believe about this preference? Or another good question is also, is this truly your belief? Think about that one. Is the fact that gender matters so much to you something that you truly believe, or does it maybe have to do with someone else's beliefs? Let me give you an example of this so you understand what I mean. So in the past, when families were a lot bigger, this had, amongst other reasons, a lot to do, with the way society was back then. More people were actively religious, families were bigger, fathers were expected to work, and it was more common for mums to stay at home to take care of the children. Now, I know I'm sort of sketching something that may be considered as old-fashioned, but that's sort of what I'm getting at. Because a lot of our beliefs, they come from the past. They're taken over from our parents, that in turn were given these ideas by their parents. It's just sort of a matter of evolution, really. And that goes as well for our thoughts. They also sort of evolve in our brains. Dads were providers, mums were the carers, fathers hoped for a son that could carry on their family name. And hey presto, you know, a belief is born. And maybe you took on that belief as well. How many people aren't out there that say, you know, my goal in life is to get a great job, get married, have children, and that's my life. And then when someone turns around and says, well, you know, like a good job, but hell no, I don't need a partner in my life, let alone children, then very often people are surprised. And isn't that a belief that you took on from maybe your parents, that you're supposed to take this path in life, get married, have children, good job, and that's your life? You know, when someone is verbal about diverting from that typical path, then it comes across as a bit, you know, unusual. And maybe you agree with this, maybe not. I'm just trying to sort of sketch things here, show you that things that we tend to think and feel are very often beliefs and truths that we automatically took over from our parents or from our teachers. In our society, there are many beliefs that we take for what they are. It's easy enough. But when someone goes outside of the norm, then we find it really hard to understand them. So maybe ask yourself the question, why do I have such a strong preference for the gender of my baby? Why do I feel so disappointed about the gender of my baby? But really, the same applies to anyone who is bothered by the fact that someone has this preference. Have you ever wondered why it bothers you that someone has such a specific wish for a boy or a girl? Why is it that it bothers you? That's also a very valid question. Is it because you have certain beliefs? Is it because you have certain fears? And how is this thought affecting your life? It's easy to just assume that someone is a bit of a selfish person for having a certain thought or having a certain belief, and that karma will come to bite him in the rear end when it's really the opposite. But maybe it's more helpful for your own way of thinking to become curious as to why is this person so stuck on this idea, and how will this thought affect him, or no, that's not right, that how will this thought affect the future of this person? And if so, is it even going to be a negative effect? If indeed the baby turns out to be the preferred gender, will they not maybe become an even more wonderful parent? Or if the gender turns out to be the opposite, be a disappointment, will they be able to be flexible and become wonderful parents regardless of the gender? These are also questions, you know. The outcome doesn't have to be negative. And if somebody is truly disappointed and therefore struggling in parenthood, then isn't it more important to support the person and to offer them help instead of judging them? You know, would it not be better to remain curious and to ask the right questions that are helpful instead of putting your judgment on someone? You know, offering them help and support instead. And if you are the one feeling the disappointment and the judgment, and you are feeling yourself slipping into, you know, maybe a negative emotional state because of this, then it may also be a good idea to ask yourself some questions about why this bothers you so much. So ask yourself questions. Why? What exactly is the problem? And is it really disappointment that I'm experiencing here? Is that what I'm feeling? Is it the fear of judgment for having a preference? Or ask yourself, what's the best case scenario, even if the gender isn't what I'm wanting it to be? Or at what other times in my life did I feel this same form of disappointment? Am I sure that it is even that? what emotions am I feeling? And so there's a whole list, a huge list of other questions that you can ask yourself to make sure that you don't become stuck in feeling negative emotions towards something that in its core is a beautiful gift. You're having a baby, and that baby needs you to be fit. You need to be physically fit, but you really also need to be mentally fit. That's equally important to be able to take care of this little creature the best as you can. Do you feel that you're struggling with this? Or perhaps you struggle not because you have the preference, but because maybe your spouse has your preference, has a certain preference. Or maybe other children in your family have a certain preference and are extremely disappointed. And maybe you're finding hard to deal with that. If you need some help, to get your head around this, whether it's your thoughts or maybe somebody else's thoughts that are bothering you and potentially affecting your mental health, then please reach out. I promise you I'll be able to help you. Please don't hesitate and get in touch. Thanks for listening today. Take care.